Hi everyone, welcome to Extended Q&A. Just waiting for Doug to get here and then we'll get started. For folks just joining the room, we're just waiting for Doug to get here and we'll get started with all of your great questions. Looks like Doug is having some trouble. We are troubleshooting with him now. Thanks for your patience, everyone.
Okay. Joyce, yeah. Sorry.
Great, you did it.
Okay. Sorry about
So
that.
good to have you here.
Yeah.
No worries. Well, thanks so much for that, Doug. We've got about 200 people here eager to hear more from you. So I'm going to dive right in.
Okay.
We've got a great question from John Roberts, who would like to know, can science alone save species like wolves, or do we need to enshrine a precautionary principle into our culture or our government?
Boy, I don't know. I think science is the way we learn about nature, but people have to act on what we learn through science. So I don't think that's a bad idea. I mean, really, science has not been integrated or accepted very well in policymaking, but, so some people need to do something with the, you know, uh, dissemination of knowledge, what we learn about the world. So I do think that's a good idea. And I don't know how you get something like the precautionary principle involved, but certainly science is how we learn about the world. Policy and human debate is how we determine how to live in it. And right now there's kind of a disconnect. So I would agree with that statement.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. Great question from Briga Gentle, who would like to hear some of your favorite things about working with wolves.
Connection with nature. That's how I grew up. And really, how do I say, living in a human world can be kind of dull and boring. And, when I want to learn something about the human world, I can read about it. I can talk to somebody and they tell me what they're thinking. When you try and study a wolf or another wildlife species, they don't tell you anything. It's a mystery. Learn their secrets, which require you to be patient, go out into the natural world, sit and watch and follow wildlife and look for their signs. And when you can learn how they deal with the same set of problems that we have, survival and fulfillment and food, and a lot of species are social, and we're very social. When you can peer into their world or get a window into how they live, it helps me live because it's a different approach, and they don't tell you about it. So it's really rewardingly won knowledge. And I think we need more of that. People just think about people, and other life forms have so much to tell and so much to offer. It's just hard to get it. And that for me is the most exciting thing. That's the kind of thing that fires my jets my whole life. Because when you see that wonderful thing, and a lot of times it's just you and the animal out in nature, it's really wonderful.
I love that, Doug. I think there's so many people here that feel the same way, that draw their inspiration from the animal kingdom. So we've got a California heavy crowd here today. So a lot of questions about wolves in California. Sue Delanus asks, wasn't there a wolf in California that got shot? And Carol Guttery asks, why aren't there more wolves in California? There are a lot of wilderness areas in the Northern Sierras.
Yeah, so I'm not sure about the wolf that got shot. I try and follow California wolf issues, and there was a pack that did have pups in California. I'm not quite sure what happened to them, or am I familiar with the shooting? Although California has one of the better wolf management plans written, because they're accepting and open about having wolves, but they acknowledge that there can be problems. And so in terms of habitat that's available for wolves, the only two habitat requirements wolves have is large ungulates and protection from people. And that's really all they need, because in the general session, I mentioned their adaptability in terms of climate change, which is a good thing. But, so that prey thing, like you saw in Yellowstone, on the map I showed, there are blank areas that wolves hadn't settled. That's because there's no prey there in the winter. And I'm going to guess a lot of the wilderness areas in California have a similar problem. You're the first place that gets the moisture off the Pacific Ocean in the winter, a lot of snow. So those remote areas get a lot of snow. And so with a lot of snow, that means all of the prey for wolves, primarily things like elk and deer, are going to elevationally migrate to lower elevation. And that's where the people are. So the second habitat requirement for wolves is, protection from people. That's where they're going to run into people and problems are going to start. And so I think it's a combination of a lot of your really remote areas get a lot of snow, essentially. Now, not all of them do. And wolves can do fine in human-dominated landscapes. It's just in general, people don't do fine with wolves around. And not knowing California super well, I would think about those two things, where the prey are year-round and what people are doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so often true, that wildlife actually does fine when left alone. So a related question from Robert Root. How vulnerable are wolves to poaching outside of the boundaries of the park?
Pretty vulnerable. So a big part of conservation, I'm a little bit of an idealist. I rever nature. And so the idea of hunting came slowly to me. I didn't grow up hunting. My dad didn't hunt. And in fact, stopped me in the woods one day and said, how could anybody shoot anything that beautiful when we saw a deer? But hunting has conservation implications. And I've been criticized a lot by other wolf biologists who are against hunting wolves. But I will say this, and it's hard to say, but I think it's true. Perhaps the greatest conservation contribution someone could make is reaching the heart of a hunter alone in the woods. And so because the decision people make when they're alone, whether in the woods or at home or in cities, the thoughtfulness you get by being alone is world changing. So if you have reached the heart of a hunter, and while that person, he or she, is out hunting something else, elk or deer, and they see a wolf, they can shoot it and nobody will know about it. That's poaching. Now, there is legal hunting, there's illegal, but they might shoot it when it's illegal. That's poaching, and no one will know, and they'll get away with it. So how do you stop that? You reach their heart. And so I can't take a hard line. I hunt myself, elk and deer. You can't take a hard line against conservation and hunting. Hunting is part of conservation because it turns people off. They get mad, they get angry and go, that guy, Doug Smith, I don't like him. And if I see a wolf out there, I'm just going to shoot it because he represents wolves. Don't want to do that. We got to have this middle ground where we work these things out and you don't anger people. Now, it's got to be regulated hunting, and there needs to be places where wolves can be left alone. But there's other places where they're going to conflict with humans, and hunting's part of the story.
Right. And you're so right about that individual choice. You know, so much of WCN's funding goes to support outreach at the community level, people who are living right on the front lines, who are making those individual choices each day, whether to poach or to take a natural resource. So we have a great question from Nicole Strotterman about how you get there. What type of work do you do to educate the public or those that live around the park in order to achieve that behavior change?
Well, I got to take it aside out. So actually for my PhD, I studied wolves my whole life, but I took a side trip to study beavers. And the one thing I learned from beavers is never give up. Their motto is perseverance, really. I learned that from beavers. They just keep at it. And so in this conservation kind of, I almost said fight, it shouldn't be a fight. In this conservation goal that we have, you got to keep at it. And you have to be persevere. And so you need to, and you know, I used to, a good part of my career, you know, people who thought different from me, who didn't like wolves, I kind of wrote them off. And I thought they were out of it or uneducated or whatever. No. You got to talk to them. You got to engage them, and you have to listen. So one of the most effective conservation things I think I've done, maybe in my career, that's a big statement. I grew up riding horses in Ohio. My dad had a camp. That's what connected me with nature. Right now, I ride horses into hunter camps that surround Yellowstone. Not in the park. There's no hunting in the park. I just did it 2 weeks ago. I ride a horse. That's how, you know, because everyone rides back in these wilderness areas to hunt elk primarily. And they ride in. They bring clients in to hunt. I ride in the camp. Let's talk about wolves. And I don't go with an agenda. I don't go with a list of things to say. I just let the conversation evolve. I study wolves with radio collars. You study wolves by riding the mountains with a gun. Let's compare notes. And I try and listen more. And I think that's true conservation, because they view me as a government bureaucrat that sits at my desk all the time, who can't even ride a horse. So meeting them on their terms and discussing without an agenda and trying to listen more than I talk, I think it's great conservation. And so that's talking. That's going to the other person, listening. I think that's key. And I know all you folks probably already do that. It's just a reminder. And that was, you know, a ranger from Yellowstone gave me this idea, and he actually did it with me. He's like, we don't care about your publications. We don't care about your interviews. We don't care about your magazine articles. You've got to reach the people. And so that I've been trying to do that ever since. And that was 20 years ago that ranger told me that. So very, very great question.
Yeah, listening is so powerful. Sometimes it's so simple. We've got a lot of questions about alternatives, right? Maybe as a tool in addition to listening to people. A bunch of questions about dogs and tradition or alternative management efforts. So a question from Linda McLaughlin. Traditional shepherding in Romania using guard dogs is very effective at helping maintain balance between wolves, bears, and livestock. Do ranchers make use of dogs for stock protection?
Some do. You know, the United States has got kind of, you know, we're a country of individual liberty. That's kind of what we're founded on. So telling people what to do, people rancor at, they recoil, they don't like it. But there's a lot of non-lethal ways to coexist with wolves. Europe has probably led on this. The guard dog thing is key. The problem with guard dogs, you have to get the right breed, and you have to have a lot of them, because wolves live in packs and hunt in packs. So those guard dogs could get easily overwhelmed. So you need many, and they need to be able to work together. And I'm not up in that. A close friend of mine, Ray Coppinger, was very involved with that. He went to Europe to learn about it. He pushed guard dogs. But the other thing about it is there tends to not be a silver bullet. There's not one thing that keeps your livestock safe. Guard dogs combined with other practices. You going out in the field is one. Wolves don't like it being around people. That's just a deterrent. Bringing livestock in at night, I know that's difficult. But there's things you can do with your livestock too. There's a rancher here in Montana I don't know quite how she's doing it, but if your livestock doesn't run, they're going to be able to defend themselves against wolves better. All predators chase. If you run, they chase. I gave a talk last night at a ranch in Montana to a small group. They don't have calves up in the mountains. They wait till their calves are older and larger, and that makes them less vulnerable. So, life is all about subtlety and detail. Everybody gets the big things right, but the small things are what the ones that catch you. And those little tweaks to ranching, a few of them, can really almost eliminate predator attacks, wolf attacks. But guard dogs might be the most important, although they're alone by itself, probably not. You need a couple other things. But yeah, thank you.
So switching gears a little bit to a biological question from Nyana Rathmaloga, who'd like to know, do you see negative assortative mating for color in wolves in Yellowstone? And in your opinion, does that account for the persistence of black wolves in the park?
Yikes. That is, wow. Yes, actually, there's only 3 or 4 vertebrate species, there's probably tons that do it, but only 3 to 4 vertebrate species have been documented to select for mates that are not like them. And so we actually did a study on this. I forget the woman's name, it was this Nicole. We did a study on this, and we looked at most of our pairings. Roughly half the wolves in Yellowstone are black, half are gray. There's 3 color forms: white, black, gray. Gray is the most diverse. Yellowstone, very few white, mostly black, gray. It does wax and wane, but it's kind of stayed at 50-50 black, gray. And we have more black, gray pairings than is expected by chance. In other words, if you had random mating, we very rarely get black, black, and gray, gray matings. We do get that, but it's very rare. So they are selecting for opposites. We don't know the mechanism. Some of the colleagues that worked on this, Dan Staler and Phil Hedrick, where we published a paper on this, might have other insights, but we do know they're selecting for something that's not like them. And that probably has selectivity advantages in terms of survival. And there's more to it than that. Black genes in wolves are very important. They have an immune function response. A heterozygote black wolf appears to be more capable of defending against disease than, say, a homozygote black or a gray wolf. So this is a very intricate system. I'm not explaining it that well to go fast, but yes, opposites attract in this particular case.
Fascinating. We've got actually a really interesting, timely question, given that we just celebrated Indigenous Peoples Day here in the US, from Victoria Dunch, who asks, what role has Indigenous knowledge or traditional ecological knowledge played in restoration efforts?
Well, I think key, wolves are culturally and spiritually important to Indigenous peoples, and they coexisted with them for, thousands of years. And wolves were pretty much eliminated across most of the U.S. except northern Canada and Alaska, where, those are places Indigenous people really had a great connection with wolves. An old expression that an elder told me was, you can always find a meal at a wolf kill because they'll leave enough for you. But I think their kind of long-term knowledge, their stories, Indigenous people are among the best storytellers I've ever come across on canoe trips in the North. And it took me a while to come around to understand the value of stories, because trained classically as a scientist, you think the world is best portrayed with numbers and best communicated with numbers. And it was my exposure to Indigenous people, and then here throughout the West with Indians. A friend of mine from the Nez Perce tribe, sadly just passed away, Levi Holt, was very much into telling stories about wolves. And I think we connect with that better than me putting a bunch of numbers up on the screen. So very important contribution.
I love that. I actually was about to ask you this question, but I think you just answered it. But I would love to hear you reiterate your thoughts. Donald Drake asks, what are the most important remaining unanswered research questions that need to be answered to aid wolf conservation?
I think a lot of it deals with social science. Some of the people I worked with started a spate of wolf studies, Dade Meach being the most prominent, Durwood Allen in 1958. There's, Dave Meach is still going. Derwin Allen passed away, but in 1958 there wasn't much known about wolves, and since then they've been one of the most intensively studied creatures, and we know a lot about their population dynamics, their predator prey. We certainly studied their predator prey. What do they kill? Why do they kill? What does it do? A lot. What we haven't studied that much is their social dynamics, and we're trying to do that in Yellowstone. So to answer your question directly, sociality is a key one, but I think we're on a human frontier. I mean, I think for the near future, everything's going to hinge on what we do next, about things like climate change, about protecting habitats. Like I said a few minutes ago, wolves actually do fine with people. People do fine with them, but it's best if they have space, and all wildlife and plants and ecosystems need protection, and we're kind of at a critical time to protect those things. And so those are human decisions, and as we can see now with the election a couple of weeks away, we're very polarized. Yet nature is going to suffer unless we can kind of come together and collectively make these decisions. So how do you do that? That's called social science. I don't do that. Selfishly, I've studied just, wolves and birds and elk and those things my whole life, beavers. But I think we're at a point now where humans need to weigh in.
I love that, Doug. And I'm going to wrap up this session with some questions that we're getting about how people can weigh in and make that difference. So 2 related questions. One from Jerry Post. Hi, Jerry. If numbers don't convince people and stories do, what is the best way for scientists to change people's opinion and behaviors? Can we use technology like social networks to help change people's behavior for the better? And then another related question from Carrie Hovey, who asked, other than voting for elected officials that support National Park Service and the national parks, how best can we support your conservation efforts and further studies of the wolves?
Yeah, geez. Really great stuff. Well, first off, I'll go to I think you said Jerry's question. I try and do as many interviews as I can. I try and speak to many as audiences that I can. COVID's kind of changed some of that, as I would be in San Francisco now, but I think all that stuff is good. But the most effective form of communication I have found in my career is one-on-one. And I know that you can't save the world talking to people one-on-one, but I hate to say it, in the back of my mind, almost every conversation I have with someone is thinking about, a conservation message. So much of the world's about people, and it's a little bit, it's about nature. I think something like 99% of charity goes to people and 1% goes to animals, and a lot of that's dogs and cats. So I kind of try, and in every, one-on-one relationship I have, think about that. Last night I was at a little bit of gathering, small group, social distance type thing. And, the guy's telling me about climate change isn't that bad. I'm thinking, don't lose it, listen to them, have a discussion. So I think the one-on-one thing is very important, because your social groups are going to listen to you more than they listen to me. And certainly social media has a role in that. That's kind of the new thing for this age. And, how do you help? This is, I hate to say, all this work needs money. So where you want to give it is up to you, but that's key. These studies to keep going, the outreach to keep going. We have to publish a book to get the word out. We tried to make the book accessible to everybody, but it's about communication and keeping these studies going. Your vote definitely matters, without a doubt. It for sure matters. And so, yeah, that's in a nutshell, I think, one of the ways forward. Yeah, or some of the ways forward.
Doug, thank you so much. At WCN, we really believe each person can make a difference. So thank you for being here with us today. So many of you today have asked how we can help. We've pinned a link here in the chat box to your right to support Yellowstone National Park and Doug's Wolf Project. So if you'd like to make a donation to support his work, please do so. Please visit his booth. There are links to support and engage with his work there too. Doug, thank you so much for being with us. We're very grateful to have you with us today.
And thank you, Joyce, and everybody else. Bye.